Hey, a lot of people have been asking me how I structure my real estate business, so I wanted to kind of show you a high level overview of my entire business structure, and then I'm going to deep dive my actual real estate business step by step so you guys understand the importance of it and the reasons why I did it this way. So overall, it starts off with the trust, the will, the power of attorney, right? That's like the highest level of structure that I have. And then it goes into right here is my primary residence. So, this is the house that I live in. This is the house that I pay a mortgage to. To me, it's a liability, right? But I put it in the trust in case something happens to me where I pass away, and then my wife doesn't have to actually go through the probate process. So if you guys don't know, if you guys have a property and you pass away and it's not in a trust, more likely than not, you will have to go through the probate process in order to claim that property back. And you got to pay all these different taxes because it's not a trust. So it's really important to have that property inside that trust. The next part of the plan here, so from the trust, we have the holding companies here. So these holding companies are strictly just my real estate businesses, right? So these are, any long-term rentals. This is my long-term rental here. This is a multi-family property that we own, and then this is a property out in Iowa. So if you guys don't know, like I have 6 properties in Iowa, and these are all put into different LLCs. And like I said earlier before, I'm gonna actually deep dive what exactly is inside my real estate portfolio and how they're all structured within this LLC. So we move over to an S corp. So this S corp here is actually a holding company as well. So this is a holding company, but it's specifically an S corp, and this is I can actually pay myself a dividend or a salary from all these different structures that are moving up into it. But basically, how I structured this S corp is I broke it off into 2 different holding companies. I have a holding companies for my businesses with partners, and I also have a holding company for businesses that I own by myself, right? So if we start off in the holding company that I own myself, I have a lending business here. So this is like me lending, you know, double close money, earnest money deposits, and just private money lending in general. So this is like, if you need money for a fix and flip loan or a gap loan, this is usually the money that I lend out on a 12 to 50% interest. So this is a separate business on my own. This is a business that I actually own passively. This is my title company. This is my, AI software business that's all in here. So these are all passive businesses that I own without, just my LLCs are in here. And then this is just a real estate business that I own on the side. So this is any software businesses that I own. So this is more on the active side. And then if you move over to the holding company, so Taj, right? This is my portfolio business that I own with a partner. So this is my Iowa properties. This is other businesses that I own with those same partners. This is an LLC for my real estate coaching program, right? So cash flow closers. This is an LLC that I own with different partners. And then this is my wholesale business that I own with another partner. So all these different entities are pushed into a holding company in here and funnels up to my S corp. And it's actually really helpful for taxes to be able to do the pass-through method. So, all my losses, all my gains are funneled through one corporation, and then I can file for taxes, and it's super, super clean. So I want to talk about the importance about having the right corporate structure, especially in the beginning of starting a real estate career, right? So most people, let's look at Happy Tim here. They'll buy a property, they'll fork out some cash, and then they'll buy a house, right? They'll live in that house most likely, right? So this is the traditional route. Someone buys their primary residence, and then they end up moving. They end up renting or buying another house later on, and then they end up renting this property, right? So it becomes a rental, and then they're getting cash flow, and they get sued, right? So let's say they get sued, something bad happens to the tenant that's living in this property and they sue you. The crazy thing is that since this property is in your personal name, right? Your mortgage is on you, you're collecting rent, all these different things. You are 100% liable for this, okay? There's no protection other than normal insurance, and there's nothing separating you from the actual asset. Now that's why these LLCs are literally called limited liability companies because they help you shield yourself from liability, right? And also it protects your identity, right? You have anonymity, you have protection. People just can't randomly find you. Like if you look me up, like all these wholesalers out there that are looking people up, skip tracing sellers to find and call them to buy their house, you can't find me. Okay. They used to find me because I was a dummy. They used to cold call me nonstop, nonstop, nonstop because all my properties were in my personal name. And then when I actually did get an LLC, so I'll tell you this really funny story. My first LLC was called U Properties. And remember how I said that an LLC protects you from liability and also anonymity? Well, anybody in Louisville, Kentucky knew who owned this property. I mean, I was probably the only guy with the last name U in Kentucky and the only guy that was buying properties. So literally anyone that could look this business up can see that I own these properties and they know that I'm the owner. So they didn't really protect me from anything, right? So rule number one, make an LLC name that is just anonymous, right? Ambiguity, right? So, I mean, one of my LLCs is literally this. Like, they can't tell who owns it or anything like that. And trust me, you can try to find it. You probably won't. You don't know what state it's registered in, right? But that's just this the quick tip. The second thing is setting it up yourself. So I also set this LLC up myself because it was cheaper. I think I spent like maybe $50 to register it to the state of Kentucky. And whoever registers the LLC has to put down an address. So literally it says my name and the address of where I lived and then my phone number, right? And then when you look up these LLCs, there's ways to figure out who's actually the owner or who is the registered agent, which was who I was, and it has all my information on it. So there was literally no point of me owning this LLC because it was just open, wide open for everybody to know. So I do suggest that you either use a professional company to help you set it up. And also they have the right paperwork to help you set it up. So I really don't suggest you make LLCs yourself, even though they're cheaper, because it just throws everything out the window in terms of the perks of having an LLC. If you want a free consultation, there's a link down below and you'll be able to schedule a free hour call with Prime Corporate Services. This is the company that actually built my entire business structure that I showed you earlier. Free consultation, definitely jump on it. It's absolutely for free. So let's talk about my business structure now, right? So we've talked about lessons learned. We talked about what not to do. Now I'm gonna talk about how I've structured my things. So any properties that I own, right? I usually like to bunch them up by state and by the amount of equity. So if I have an LLC that owns a property here, I usually don't like to go over $1 million of equity. Okay. So that's just my personal preference. You can have, I know people that own one property, one LLC, one property, one LLC. I think that's overkill, especially if you have a larger portfolio and you're paying like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of LLC management funds and registered agent stuff. I think it's absolutely unnecessary, but I like to keep things under $1 to $2 million of equity because that's just my personal take. If something bad happened to that LLC or I got sued, I'm okay with losing that $1 million of equity versus, my entire real estate portfolio, right? So that's just my take. And then, like I said, I like to keep it by the state. So I have all my Kentucky properties in one, my Iowa properties in the other, and any other properties I own throughout the state or country, I have it in a different LLC to match that. So let's talk about the structure that I have. So I have an LLC for my Louisville, Kentucky properties, right? So let's label this. So this is my Kentucky LLC, and it owns, X amount of properties. And then I have my LLC for my Iowa property. So this is my Iowa LLC, and this is actually owned multiple ways with multiple partners, right? So that's the thing that I was showing you before. It's got my partner Adam and it's got my partner Jake. So Jake's LLC and Adam's an LLC, right? So this is a three-way ownership here. So these are my rental properties, right? Just an example of how I would do it. And then these LLCs would funnel into a holding company. So a holding company, usually your holding companies are going to be in Wyoming. And the reason why is Wyoming has the best laws in terms of being for the business owner and not disclosing a lot of information about you, right? You as the owner. So there's a lot of perks of being a business owner by having a holding company LLC out in Wyoming. There's, all these properties. So you have to imagine, right, that these three properties are owned by this Kentucky LLC. And if something happens where they have to sue someone. Let's say something bad happens and they want to sue somebody. So obviously, Tim is the owner of all these structures and entities, and house number one is trying to sue me, trying to sue the owner. When they look me up, they're gonna see this LLC as the owner, and then they're gonna realize that that's not actually the owner of the LLC, right? The actual owner is not Tim. The actual owner is another LLC in Wyoming. And it's super freaking hard to find whoever is the person that owns the property because guess what? Remember my last chart that I showed you? This holding company is actually owned by a trust. So there's another layer of protection. There's another layer. So the type of trust that I have is a revocable. I don't have a irrevocable. I think I'm way too young for it. And I'm not that super rich, right? That's crazy. I don't need to shelter or anything like that. But a trust does add some extra protection, right? Like I said, my personal property, my personal residence is in the trust, but it just makes it super difficult for people to find you and to sue you, right? It's just super hard. And, there's a lot of tax liability and stuff like that. So, and then when you level up and you start getting a little more creative with things, let's just say that you have an LLC, right? So that this is a possibility as well to have an LLC that's managing, right? So this is a management LLC. So the reason why this is actually a kind of a good idea is because imagine this. Imagine that you have tenants paying. So you have tenants now paying rent to this LLC, and this is the only LLC that they're going to be dealing with, right? Because they're paying the management company. So if something bad happens, right, all the leases, all the paperwork is done by the management LLC. Obviously, they are working for the Kentucky Property LLC that actually owns the assets, but the tenants don't know that. So when something bad happens and they want to sue a company, they're going to sue this company right here. They're going to sue the management company. And guess what? There is nothing. If something bad happens, there's nothing that you can lose, right? If you have all your paperwork done, you have all your, banking documents squared away, and you do happen to get in trouble for something, and you have to lose this LLC, well, guess what? This LLC owned absolutely nothing. It only had debt, cash, and that's it, right? For managing, the bills, the payroll, and getting the rental checks. That's really it. There's no assets attached to this, and we keep it completely separate from the business, right? We keep it separate from the assets. So that's a little tip and trick, right? So there is another thing for my structure. So that's more of the passive side of the house. Let's move my holding company over here. And we're going to start breaking down into my active income. So this is LLC, and let's say this is my wholesale business, right? So this is a pretty cool thing. So this LLC in my wholesale business is obviously a separate entity because it's active income, right? So this is going to be active income, and this is a really important thing for taxes. So you want to split up what's active and you want to split up what's passive. And most people don't really know the difference, right? But active income is most likely anything that you're making in less than a year. And this is my passive, right? And obviously, this is all taxed differently. So you want to make sure you split them. And your CPA will love you if you do this, right? Most CPAs, my CPA did this. My CPA yelled at me for having everything in one LLC, right? Literally 3 years ago, I had one LLC, U Properties, right? The story that I talked to you about earlier. It did flips, it did rentals, and it did wholesale. My CPA had no idea how to do my taxes. Like he yelled at me, right? He said, you need to split these up. You need all these different paperwork. Get your books right now. Do the right thing. Start with one LLC if you have to, but start breaking it off to make sure that you're good, right? So let's keep your books clean, right? Have the active side of the business split off from your, from your passive side. And let's say you make 100K active active income, right? This is more for taxes, and your 100K goes into the holding company. And then guess what? You do your tax depreciation from all your other properties that you own, and you do the pass-through method to do your taxes, right? And then we funnel everything up through the trust, and then you can always pay yourself a payment, right? Pay yourself, and then you pay your taxes, right? Okay, so let's start talking about really interesting tips and tricks that I can do with the way my business structure is, right? So let's say I find a wholesale deal in Kentucky that I really, really want to keep and I want to buy it. So let's say I got it from the seller for 90K and I can actually sign it for 100K, right? So let's say that I want to keep this like long-term rental. I can actually sell this property to one of my LLCs here, right? So let's say I want to sell my house to one of my Kentucky LLCs here, right? This is just an example of what you can do. And we're gonna charge you 100K for one of our properties here. And the reason why is because I'm gonna use a hard money loan, right? So this is a little, I know it's a little off topic, but this is just for, extra bonus, right? You want to do a hard money loan, and basically you're charging yourself $10,000, right? You're charging yourself $10,000. So this LLC makes 10K, right? So this LLC makes $10,000 based off the assignment fee. And then you're going to renovate and then burr, and you're going to pay back the hard money loan. And then now you have a property that you've burred out, and you've also made $10,000 on your LLC for the wholesale business. So you're basically using your own corporate structure to pay yourself, right? Because you want to get paid for the work of finding the deal, right, from the wholesale business, which gives you the ability to continue marketing, right? Because if you pay yourself $10,000, now you have $10,000 more to market to find your next deal. And then your long-term portfolio LLCs are actually doing the deal and making the money, right? And having that long-term wealth build up. So I hope this makes sense. I hope this was really helpful. And this is basically a rough overview of how I structure my real estate business, why I do it, how it kind of flows up for tax purposes. And like I said before, if you guys want a professional to help you consult with you on how to structure your business, there's a free link down below. And hope you guys learned something, and I'll see you guys next time.